Miriam, I watched Sheldon sitting so proud in the White House when we gave Miriam the Presidential Medal of Freedom. That's the highest award you can get as a civilian. It's the equivalent of the Congressional Medal of Honor, but civilian version. It's actually much better because everyone gets the Congressional Medal of Honor. That's soldiers. They're either in very bad shape because they've been hit so many times by bullets, or they're dead.
That was Donald Trump last night taking a swipe at Medal of Honor recipients while awarding a Republican mega donor the Presidential Medal of Freedom. And today, Trump's running mate and a fellow military vet, J.D. Vance, actually defended those comments. Listen.
I've seen him give out a number of awards and commendations to military veterans. And of course, I myself am a Marine Corps veteran of the Iraq War. This is a guy who loves our veterans and who honors our veterans. I don't think him complimenting and saying a nice word about a person who received the Presidential Medal of Freedom is in any way denigrating those who received military honors.
I'm back with my panel here, along with Iraq veteran and founder of Independent Veterans of America, Paul Rieckhoff. He joins us in our fifth seat. Paul, I was looking at your face as that sound was playing. What was going through your mind?
It's ridiculous. It's absurd. It's insulting. The VFW just put out a press release and called it asinine. It's really ridiculous, especially because he's been the commander-in-chief and given out, I think, 11 or 12 Medal of Honors himself. So he should know better. If he was one of my sons, I'd pull him on the side and explain to him the difference between the Medal of Freedom and the Medal of Honor. The problem here is he's the former commander-in-chief and a candidate for president. So I think it's bad for our country. It's also bad politics. I mean, this is the kind of stuff that drives away independence. Half the country is independent. They're not Democrats and Republicans. Half of veterans are independent, and they are a very influential demographic in this race, especially in swing states. So if you want to insult the military, he succeeded there. If you want to win the election, this isn't going to help you.
Disappointing to hear J.D. Vance basically shrug.
The only people going to defend this are politicians. I mean, it's indefensible. I think you've seen Medal of Honor recipients. You've seen the VFW is not a very political organization. They usually don't get involved in situations like this. But there's universal outrage, and he should apologize and at least try to clean it up. But this is, the same guy who attacked John McCain. There is a pattern here of at best, sloppy language when talking about the military, and it's going to hurt him and it's hurting our country.
It's the John McCain of it all. But, there were several other examples. I mean, he questioned why Nikki Haley's husband wasn't by her side. He was deployed. But this is what really stuck out to me, the anecdote about what he did when a wounded veteran sang "God Bless America" near him. This was an account by people who were there, including Mark Milley, the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Trump walked over to congratulate Avila, but then said to Milley, within earshot of several witnesses, "Why do you bring people like that here? No one wants to see that, the wounded." And he never let Avila appear in public again. That was according to The Atlantic, who had that story relayed to him. It's been confirmed by others as well. It's a pattern and a disturbing one.
Yeah, I mean, look, to your point, yes, he needs to come out and talk about what he meant or why he said what he said. I mean, when I listened to it and I saw it, and I'm not trying to defend at all what he said, but I think maybe the intent of it was the award was given, the importance of the award that she got, she didn't get injured or shot at. I mean, but it's really bad, right?
It's pretty hard to try to explain, right?
I'm not trying to defend it at all, and I'm not defending it.
Because there's no defending it. I think this is one of those really clear ones. You can believe your ears and believe your eyes. You heard it, you saw it. I mean, Medal of Honor.
But at the same time, he is a very strong defender of the U.S. Armed Forces.
He's still accountable.
You
could be the chairman of the Joint Chiefs. If you say this, it's still wrong.
There's no defense. There is an explanation, and the explanation is simply that he doesn't value ideals of sacrifice and service, honor and integrity. The idea of being a quote-unquote victim because you believed in a cause and you're willing to give your life for it is something he simply cannot fathom. He also can't, as a personality defect, tell somebody, give them a compliment without having to compare them or denigrate somebody else. Like, just say this is a great award, period, full stop.
I think it's interesting that he always focuses on the wounded, the injured, the people who didn't make it back as a failure. I truly do not understand that, but we cannot deny that that has not happened multiple times. I mean, it's just a repeated tick of his in private and in public.
Well, allegedly he did this in France, right? At the cemetery. He didn't want to go to the cemetery because he said
That was a bad weather call. It's been debunked 1,000 times over.
John Kelly, who was there,
and 18 people who were there. John Kelly is selling lies. 18 people who were there.
Wait.
It's a bad weather call.
Can I just finish my sentence? Okay, let's just assume I'm wrong about that.
Okay.
He also did say, we saw this on television, he said he doesn't like John McCain. He didn't consider him a hero because he prefers people who were not captured. This is the former commander-in-chief saying this when he was a candidate for president, that John McCain was not a war hero because he was captured. That's not something that is an admirable thing for someone to say, especially in the Republican Party that used to be a party that talked about national security and national defense and protecting the military. And so I just want some honesty from the Republicans at some point. You know, if somebody does something that's hypocritical or contradictory to what you espouse to be your values, at least have the courage to say that's wrong. Don't just defend it, just say it's wrong. And then talk about some other things. I appreciate you for doing that, Jason. I want Mark to do the same thing.
I think it is an important point. Why can't people, Republicans, just say that that's wrong? Why is it that Trump will, push them out of the Republican Party if they criticize him over something that he's wrong about?
Look, this is not the ideal comparison. I think what he was trying to he was trying, and I'm not defending it because I think the language was probably sloppy, but I think he was trying to say this is on equal par. You do not have, but the people in the Medal of Honor are heroes. They were shot at, they sacrificed their lives, they sacrificed their safety, and that's why they were honored. But when we get this down to about the military, there's no question. Donald Trump invested more in the military than everybody since Ronald Reagan.
That's also not true.
That's the pivot.
Since Ronald Reagan.
Can we talk about the issue?
Since Ronald Reagan.
Talk about the issue. Talk about the issue without the political pivot. Talk about the issue.
Okay, let me just, from the factual perspective, the budget that you're talking about was higher under Obama for several years than it was under Trump. It's just not true that he spent more on the military. But to your point, it is a pivot because that's not the core issue.
Yeah,
why does Trump get away with doing what he did when it's clearly out of bounds? Does he get away with it?
I don't think he does get away with it. No, I think it's stacking up. I think the pattern is becoming more clear. He's pushing more people away from him as a candidate. He's also pushing more people away from the Republican Party. This is not the party of John McCain anymore. This is not the party of Colin Powell. This is also about integrity and about leadership and about command climate. You have to ask yourself, is this the right way to speak to people? All the time, not just with military people, but I have 2 young sons. I want them to have a president and both candidates that they can look up to, who can set the right example, who can set the right tone, who can be respectful in everything that they do. And he doesn't do that. He shows a lack of character constantly. He's nasty, he's mean. That's not real leadership. And we need real integrity leadership, especially right now from both parties, because our kids are watching and our enemies are watching. And when they see a former commander-in-chief continue to attack our military, they love it. They celebrate it. Putin is so happy to see stuff like this. So we got to get it cleaned up across the board. And the Republicans should be the ones to do it because he's your guy.
You know, Paul, I wonder, I'm sure you know veterans who support Trump.
Definitely.
Do they give him a pass for this? Are they bothered by it? Does this just blow over?
The military and veterans community is not a monolith. It's as diverse as this country. And you've got hardcore people that will never move no matter what he says. But you have a key group of this country, I'd say roughly half of veterans, who are up for grabs, who maybe don't like either candidate. And when they see this stuff over and over again, it pushes them away. So I think it does make an impact. And each clip speaks for itself. And over time, it seems to be a character issue. And I think that's what military folks are looking for, is character and honor and integrity from both sides, and especially from someone who wants to be commander-in-chief. The old question used to be, who do you want to have a beer with? Right? Which candidate do you want to have a beer with? I think the question should be, who do you want to be the commander-in-chief of your sons and daughters?
The one who will keep him out of war.
Neither one.
That's Donald Trump.
Neither one's going to be able to do that. Let's be honest about the global reality.
Well, that's because of the failures of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris.
Neither one of them is going to be able to keep us out of war, so stop selling that stuff. That is not our modern reality in 2024.
It's also kind of awful to say that to an Iraq war veteran, because we all know how that started.
Oops.
Yeah, I can defend myself, but with all due respect, this is our global reality. And if you stand up and say, I'm going to keep you out of war, well, you got to start by pulling people out of multiple countries right now where we are actively engaged in combat.
When the Trump campaign tries to make the issues with Tim Walz's descriptions of his service a big issue, and then Trump says something like this, how does that all balance out in your view?
I don't know if it does balance out, right? I mean, I think I've been asked this question about what do I think about the Tim Walz thing, and that's not for me. Honestly, that's not a decision I can make or have an opinion on. I mean, that's somebody like you. Because I don't know enough about the situation with Tim Walz to say that that was the right thing or the wrong thing, right?
But they've suggested that he was, he was stealing valor, whatever.
Stolen valor.
They
whatever.
called him a coward.
They called him
They
a coward.
called him a coward for not deploying.
Yeah,
when he had already put in his
I
character.
actually,
And how?
I'm curious if that's.
I don't think it.
And how did Tim Walz respond this week? He said, you know what? J.D. Vance is also somebody who served. I'm not attacking a fellow veteran. Like, there is a code of honor and conduct that we are going to respect about the service and what we did. And J.D. Vance turns around and does what?
Does it again.
Bends himself over to just help Trump out. I mean, that is what Trump demands from his people. He demands that kind of loyalty that he will not give back in return. There was an entire economic policy, all these sorts of policies, Project 2025, and the second that started getting scrutiny, Trump denied 140 people who worked for him and just said, nope, I have nothing to do with this. They're not my people. It is not about bigger cause, greater service. It is about him.
Well, no, to your point on Project 2025, he can deny everything to do with Project 2025 because 140 people work for him. That doesn't mean that he has loyalty to what they're saying now if he doesn't agree with it.
Can we get back to Vance and Walz? I mean, this is where it always goes. Now we're talking about Project 20, right?
I want to say something
Vance and
about
Walz.
Let me let you. I mean, I'm curious about what you think about the Vance-Walz matchup. I mean, do you think that dispute over his military service is within bounds?
This is historic. Let's start with that, right?
Yeah.
To have post 9/11 candidates
Yes.
on the ticket from both sides is historic. And I think it's an opportunity for both of them to set a better tone for our politics, period. We can be the generation of veterans that tries to create unity, that tries to bring us together, or we can be proxies for the parties. Vance took the first shot. He did what Republicans have done in the past, which has worked, unfortunately, swift voting him, right? Going after his service. It worked on John Kerry. It worked on Max Cleland. It's a playbook, a play that they've pulled that playbook before. But the question was, how was Walz going to respond? He could go low or he could go high. He defended himself and he honored his service. Now the question is, what do? Are they going to keep going down in the gutter or are they going to pull it up and set a better example for all of our politics? That's the opportunity here.
And I think the big difference, though, I'm not questioning his service. His embellishment of his own record is absolutely fair game.
Well, look,
Thank him for his
Paul,
service, both of
Paul,
them.
I appreciate your optimism, that note that you struck. I think that's so important. On this issue, it's important to actually go high. You know what I mean? So we'll see what happens. Thank you very much for being here. And thank you for your service. Thank you so much. Everyone else, stay with me. Your nightcaps are up next.